All right, this is a review of the Ibanez EHB1005SMS. I think they could give it a better name, like, you know, the Silver Fox or something like that. But anyway, it's a great bass, spoiler alert, so you don't have to stay in tune to the end. I can just tell you right now, it's an awesome bass. Go out and buy it. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start with some sound examples because I know that's what everybody wants to know. What does the bass sound like? But I just want to real quickly give you some context for the video, let you know that there is a lot of talking in this video, just to warn you now. The intent of this video is for those people who are interested in buying the bass and they want as much information as they can about the bass, not just being, you know, going to the Ibanez website and reading the information there, but really knowing what it's like from a user's point of view, and that, you know, so they can really get a feel for the instrument as best they can through video, so that it makes their buying decision a little bit better. Also, me as a bass player, I don't really play any hard rock, so I don't even know how to pronounce the word djent. I don't know. So I'm pretty much a 50-year-old guy. I write and record music, and my playing out is on my church worship team. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what kind of bass player I am. So if you're looking for some like really heavy duty stuff, or, you know, some really virtuosos playing, you're not gonna get it here. So I'm just showing you from my perspective, from just a normal dude who plays this bass, how it works for me, and really give you an overview on it. All right, we good? Okay, let's go.
I've done a lot of foolish things that I really didn't mean.
Okay, start off with some obvious things about the bass, which you probably already know, and that is the ergonomics of it are fantastic. And first of all, the bass is extremely lightweight. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they cut off the headstock, put the tuners down here. They also gave it a chambered body, so it's very light. This particular bass, according to Sweetwater's scale, it comes in at 7 pounds and 6 ounces, and they do get lighter than that. So it feels incredibly light when you've got it on. There's absolutely no neck dive whatsoever. You can just hold it, and I mean, I'm like whacking on it trying to get it to go down, and it won't go down. It stays perfectly in place. You'll probably, if you're familiar with some of the more modern basses out there, you probably are familiar with Strandberg, and if you've seen their guitars and their basses, you probably would think that this bass probably borrows a bit from Strandberg, and I think that's definitely the case. They seem to kind of take some ideas from Strandberg, definitely. One thing is when you're in your sitting position, you can actually place the bass this way, where it's just a little bit harder to do it this way on a standard bass. Obviously you can play it in the traditional position like this when sitting down, but playing it like this gives it that 45-degree angle, which is the same when you're standing up. So it keeps it nice and in place. The only thing, I haven't been playing as much in this position when sitting down. The only reason for that is because it feels like my arm's a little bit further back than it is when I'm standing. Then it tends, I can kind of place the bass a little bit forward that way, the neck forward that way. Whereas when I sit down, it kind of wants to fall back this way. So, but it still keeps the position, the 45-degree position, which is the most ergonomically correct position for playing the bass. But I kind of feel like it's a little bit uncomfortable on my shoulder. So just something to be aware of there. But otherwise, yeah, since it has such a small body, which is nice, it doesn't get in the way when you're sitting or standing. Also, you'll notice the strap positions, instead of being more here at the center of the back of the guitar, it's kind of up here, which allows it to have that more 45-degree angle, and also with the long, I call it a horn, top horn there, it gives the bass, again, nice balance, and also just kind of puts it in that good position. An extreme cutout here, which is really great for getting access to all the frets. It has full 24 frets, and you can, without a doubt, play that highest fret without any encumbrance. Encumbrance, that's a cool word. In your way there at all. They've also got a cutout here on the back that's supposed to help with access to these highest frets, but honestly, I'm not sure how that helps any because there's nothing in the way there anyway. So I guess if you're playing that angle or something, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, regardless, it's extremely easy to get to the top frets on the bass. And yeah, it's just super comfortable bass. It does come with the strap locks, which I've put on. And I'm using it with, this is a Groove Gear strap. I can't remember which particular one, but it's like 4 inches wide, and it's like a real soft padded strap. And so this bass just doesn't even feel like I'm wearing it. It's so incredibly comfortable. So you'll have no problems whatsoever with this bass when it comes to comfort. And also, since the bass has such a small size to it, the small body, and since in this particular case it's the short to medium scale version of the bass, then it fits perfectly into a regular guitar case. So you can use any old guitar case for it, and it'll work fine. Also, on the versions that have the longer neck, the full-size neck, apparently those fit into a regular guitar case as well. So that's something pretty cool about this bass. And I'll show you the case that came with it later, the soft bag actually, and then also the soft case that I got to use with it as well. So I'll demonstrate that later in the video. Okay, so this bass is what they call a short to medium scale bass. It's a multi-scale because of the fan frets. And in this case, this string distance from here to here on the G string is 30 inches, where on the B string, it's 32 inches. And so I still consider it a short scale bass. And the fan frets, when I got it, I was like, well, I had to buy this bass sight unseen. I always like to play an instrument before you buy one, but because COVID and basses are, this bass is in short demand or high demand and short supply, that's the word. It's in short supply, and basically you can just order it online unless you happen to be lucky enough to find one in the store close to you. I'm recording this, by the way, in July of 2021. That's why I mentioned COVID. Who knows, you might be watching this video 3 or 4 years from now and you'll be like, COVID, oh yeah, COVID, I remember that. Hopefully that'll be the case and it still won't be going on. But anyway, so this bass is hard to get a hold of right now, so I had to buy it online, and I had a waiting period of about 2 months before it actually got delivered. So I took a chance on it, and one of the things too, in addition to buying a bass without having a chance to play it in advance, is also, since it has fan frets, I was like, okay, I've never even played a fan fret bass. I have no idea if this is going to work for me. And I have to say that it's really not too bad. There's a few things that make it a little weird, but otherwise it's pretty easy to use as far as your left hand. The thing that I wasn't taking into consideration was my right hand. I had no idea. I didn't even think about it. It should have been obvious, but it wasn't to me until I got the bass and I started playing it, and I started realizing, oh, I've got to compensate for the fanness of it on the bridge, because if you're playing, say you play a little closer to the bridge to get kind of, you know, a little bit of a more aggressive tone, and as you go up, you might find yourself all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any sound at all because I'm right on the bridge. So you actually, instead of going up and down the bass this way, you kind of have to kind of angle your hand a little bit so that you have an even tone. So that was a little bit of an adjustment for me, but I pretty much have, I think I'm pretty comfortable with it now. And the way, I've got a really weird technique that I have that's probably a little different than most people, where I use this finger right here, my ring finger, and I kind of pivot. I hold on to the B string with it and I pivot on that string. And unless I'm playing the B string, then I just come off of it and I play it. But once I go down to any other string, my ring finger automatically goes right back to that B string. I've got a video here on my YouTube channel, so if you want to search that out, I think it's called the B-hold bass technique, and that's just what I called it. But anyway, so since I tend to anchor my ring finger here, I tend to kind of push it up against the back pickup is typically where I play, or I might come up a little bit more and then have it bump up against the neck pickup to play. And then if I want to go beyond that, of course, I can go out of there, but that's kind of like the main area. Just up and down in this area, I can kind of pretty much, you know, get the tone that I want, and that's kind of a good position for me to play. But otherwise, again, the fan frets on the left hand, not too bad to adjust to. Actually, it's a little harder for me up here when you get really into the high frets. And I think that's because it's starting to fan this way. And so when I see, okay, this is the fret I want to play, and I play here, I'm actually, by the time my finger comes here, it's because of the angle, it's now off a fret. So that's just I don't play up in this area of the bass too much, so I'm sure over time I'll eventually adjust a little bit better. But sometimes I'll hit some bum notes if I'm up this high on the bass. Otherwise, on this area of the bass, it's been easier to adjust to. The only thing that's been a little weird is when you go to the F. Anything in F is going to be a little bit awkward for me on this bass, because normally on a parallel fret bass, your hand is over the fret, but here it's kind of over the nut. So it's almost like, and there's a little bit of an edge right here, which if you're sliding into an F, ooh, you feel that with your hand. It's not too terribly bad, but it's just like a little, ooh, little prick there. So if anytime you're fretting the F here, my hand tends to kind of be up over the nut, which is kind of weird. The neck itself is just fantastic. You're going to love this neck. To me, I feel like it's the best of all the other basses that I really like. Like I love my jazz bass neck, and the only thing about it is it feels just a little too wide, but I like a wider string spacing. But I also get tired out quicker on the jazz bass because of that wider string spacing. The Stingray basses that I play, I really love the necks on those, but the string spacing is a little too tight. Where on this bass, it feels just right. But you also have the ability to change the string spacings here, which I've been worried about because it's pretty much perfect out of the box for me. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like an 18.5 millimeter string spacing, but you can adjust it by about I don't know, a little bit. You can adjust it to, I think, about 19. If you really want to go 19 width, I think you can go to there, or shrink it down to around 17.5 or something like that. Anyway, that you can get that information on the Ibanez website, but you can adjust the string spacing, which is cool, but out of the box, it feels great. One of the things, though, I will complain about on the neck, even though to me, it's the best neck I've ever played, really, honestly. This thing is awesome. I love the neck on this bass, but there's one thing I don't like about it. And you probably have noticed in this video, and you'll see these little blue lines on here. That's actually painter's tape, some blue painter's tape, where I just kind of put some blue painter's tape there in order to help visually see where I'm at on the fretboard. It's temporary. I'll take it off and replace it with something that looks a lot better. It's just something I cut out with scissors and put on there. But the reason it's there is because the actual inlays are impossible to see. I mean, they are impossible to see. And that includes the inlays here, because when you're playing, the B string pretty much covers, you can see them kind of here. And also, it's not a solid white color that stands out. It's more of like a, I forget what you call that material that's inlaid in there, but it doesn't really stand out. And also, when you got the B string right here, the B string sits right over it, so I cannot even see any of those inlays at all. Well, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, the B string just covers up the inlays. You can't see it. And then you say, well, what about the inlays on the top of the neck? What about those? Well, those are really dark too, a darker color. Now, they are luminescents, so you can shine a light on them and they'll glow, but the glow lasts for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then it's pretty much going dark again. So the inlays are pretty much worthless on this bass. So that's why I got the little blue lines on there. I'm trying to figure out a solution to use to make it something visually. And this is just kind of a mock-up I did to see if this would work. So I'm gonna have to figure out something that I can put on here. There's also, I found some vinyl dots that people sell, where you can just get a white vinyl dot, and you can actually sticker that you stick on there, and you can put it where you want, and then that'll maybe solve the problem there. Or I could just get some pen striping colors that I put in there. I don't know. I want something subtle because I don't really want it to stand out and look stupid. But anyway, so if you can't see the blue markers I'm talking about, I will show you here. You can kind of see that, the little blue lines. That's just masking tape, or what you call it, painter's tape, to help me see where I'm at. But you can kind of see how those inlays they don't really stand out too well. And then the B string is going to like cover them up, and the ones on top are like, you can't even see those hardly. Okay, you can kind of see them in that camera light there, but trust me, they're not that bright in person. All right, so let's go to the electronics on the bass. And the Bartolini pickups, a lot of people will complain about these pickups, at least on all the forums that I read. People say, oh, it's a great bass other than the Bartolini pickups. But to be honest, I really like them. And I know a lot of people like they like a pickup that's really bright, or, you know, they say that these pickups are too dull sounding or too dark sounding, but I kind of like a dark sounding pickup, so it works for me. So your mileage may vary, as they say, but these pickups seem to be working pretty well. The bass has a preamp in it, and you can switch right here between active and passive, which is really cool. That's always been something I've always wanted on a bass, and also what I've also always wanted on an active bass is a sweepable mid EQ on it, and this has that. So that's a wonderful thing to be able to, you know, fully dial in your tone exactly the way you want. And a sweepable mid definitely makes it much easier to be able to do that. And you probably already know all of that from looking at the specs on the bass, but I will say that it works really good. It's a very flexible preamp, but it's a little bit, I think there could be some improvements on the preamp. In particular, I think that the treble roll-off, or the treble EQ in active mode, doesn't seem to do as much. And also when you're in passive mode, when it turns into a tone roll-off knob, it seems to be either on or off. There's not a whole lot of variation in between the two settings. So that's kind of a little bit of a disappointment for me. But it's a minor beef. Otherwise, you can pretty much get the tones that you want out of it. It's just, I wish it had a little bit more flexibility in that regard right there. What is cool though is when you're in passive mode, or I should say if your battery is completely dead, it works in passive mode. Or, and I tested this, I took the battery out of the bass and put it in passive mode and played it just perfectly fine like a passive bass. So if you want to just use it as a passive bass, you can do that and not ever have to worry about the preamp. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of the bass in both active and passive mode just real quickly so you can see what the bass sounds like. Also, I'm going to play the B string a little bit because I know some of you out there are like, what does the B string sound like? So I'll show you that as well. So right now I've got the bass in active mode, which is this switch down, and I've also got all the controls, all the EQ controls set at 0, so they're all centered to the tent. And I also have the pickups right in the middle, the balance knob right here, just set in the middle, bass all the way up. You can hear what it sounds like. And if I switch to passive mode, you can see that it pretty much sounds exactly the same between the two. It's not until you go into active mode and start playing with the EQ where you'll start to see a difference in the tone. Now, the one thing to point out, and this is interesting, it's in passive right now, but if I change the blend knob just a little bit, I start losing volume, which is interesting. I just noticed this right when I went to record this. Here right there, there's like a little bit of dip when you go to the front pickup or the rear pickup, or I should say the neck pickup or the bridge pickup. So something to keep in mind there with that blend knob. Okay, so let's switch back to active. You don't really get that I can tell in active mode with the blend. So you've got the blend works a lot better in active mode. Okay, so the EQ, like I said, I have everything neutral right now. Turn the treble up. That's with the treble all the way up. treble all the way down. Let's put it back to neutral, turn the bass up. All the way up. Wow. So I'm already blasting out the the input there is overloading big time, so let's back that back off. Let's see. All right, and then what the coolest part about the preamp is the mid, because you've got that sweepable mid. So let's turn the mid all the way up. Maybe not. Let's turn the bass back down. And now we can use the sweep to get exactly what frequency we want. So start hearing it right about there. And I know these are just examples of the sound. It's you could also use it as a cut. So, and then in passive mode, the treble knob actually turns into a tone roll-off. Like I said, I don't find that it has much variation to it. And I should also note too that I'm recording directly to my computer, and the bass, when you're going direct versus playing through an amp, you're going to get, the bass is going to kind of sound a little different based on, you know, what you're playing through. So keep that in mind. This is just going direct. I'm also not using any compressors or any other pedals or anything. It's just going direct. Now let's see, we're in passive. I'm gonna put everything back to, well, only one thing I have to worry about here is the tone control. I'll just put that in the center. That's with the bridge pickup. And that's with the neck pickup. So anyway, I kind of find doing demonstrations of the way a bass sounds outside of the context of music to be a little bit hard to demonstrate. I'd rather just play it in the context of a song so you can hear how it actually sounds in real life. So hopefully that example there helps you out a little bit of kind of seeing what it can do tone-wise, but really you just got to hear it within the context of the song. In short, in my opinion, is that a bass is kind of a bass, so as long as it sounds good for the song, and you can make almost any, as long as the bass produces a good tone, you can pretty much shape the tone however you want, either using an amp or using, whether it's a preamp on the bass, or you're using an external preamp from the bass, or a pedal board preamp, or, you know, EQ in the mix or whatever. You can pretty much make almost any bass sound good, in my opinion. So to me, yeah, this bass is very flexible tone-wise. It can do, pretty much I can get the tone that I want out of it. But for the most part, once I get a good tone, I don't really play with it that much. I don't change it that much. To me, the selling point on this bass, I mean, you could point to a lot of other basses that have the same kind of tone shaping functionality to it. But really the selling point for me to this bass is that, yeah, it sounds absolutely fantastic, but it's so incredibly comfortable. It's so light, it's so fun to play. And so to me, the ergonomics are really the big selling point. Yeah, of course it sounds good, but yeah, so does most all other basses nowadays for the most part. So that's my assessment on the tone controls of the bass. Okay, so you want some more examples of what does the B string sound like? Now there's one thing I'd like to tell you about the preamp, and this is something I got from the Talk Bass forum. I was on there and somebody had mentioned there's a mod you can do, and I'm going to show that to you, where you can change out the preamp setting for, well actually I think it's, I'll have to get the information and I'll put it on the screen, but it changes the, I think it gives it a little bit extra gain boost, and I think it scoops the mids a little bit. So anyway, I'll show you that. It basically, you take off this back plate and you make an adjustment in there, and you can change the actual preamp setting. Okay, so you know how I told you that there is a bass mod that you can do on this bass? I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I have not done this mod yet, and I have absolutely zero electrical skills, electronic skills, so I'll show you that this should be a mod that is easy enough for anybody to do. First thing you gotta do is take the screws off the back of this little plate here that gets you to the electronics. There you go. And basically what it is this right here. I don't even know what these things are. I just know that online somebody said you can unplug this from here into here, and that'll give you a different sound. Of course this thing's, oh, it comes right out. Check that out. Okay, apparently there's a trick to this. I guess you gotta pull up on this little doodad. Okay, this is really, it's hard to see. It's kind of like the plugs inside of a computer. If you've ever changed out a hard drive or anything like that. Apparently this does something with the mids maybe, and also like can change out your gain. Okay, I got it out, and now I'll put it into that one. All right, I've just done a bass mod. Look at me. All right, so let's just throw this plate back on. All right, so I've done the mod on the bass, and I'm gonna play it. Trying to decide what the difference is. It does sound like there's a little bit more gain to it. Also, maybe a little bit of a change in the mid frequencies, maybe a little bit. It seems to have a little bit more hair on the sound. But overall, not hearing a whole lot of difference. But it's kind of hard to tell without listening side by side to the before and after. But anyway, I wanted to point it out to you so that you can try it on your bass. As you saw, it only took just a couple minutes to make that switch, and you might like the change. I'll definitely have to try it at church and see what it sounds like there through the PA. Otherwise, I think it's mostly a little bit of a hotter signal. But anyway, yeah, give it a try. It's an easy change, and you can always change it back in just a few minutes if you don't like it. But yeah, thought I would point it out to you since it's a cool little mod that I found online thanks to talkbass.com. So when I first got the bass, one of the things I had to get used to was the locking output jack on the bass. It's got this little red tab here. I don't know if you can see that, but you have to push that little red tab in order for the cable to come out. Otherwise, you can yank on this thing like crazy and it will not come out. And the reason why I was having struggle with it at first is because I was trying to push this tab down with one hand and there we go, get it out with the other. Kind of felt like I was wrestling an alligator there. So I actually realized though that I can do it one-handed a lot easier if I just push my thumb there and then pull with the other fingers and it comes out. Because I originally was thinking, I don't know if I like this this locking output jack, and on TalkBass forums there was some discussion about how to easily get rid of that locking mechanism and convert it to a non-locking. And I almost was thinking about doing that, but then once I got used to the one-handed trick, I was like, I'll keep it on. It's not as bad now that I've gotten used to how to use it. So the stock strings that come with the bass are Diodero XLs, and a lot of people complain about those strings. I'll admit I wasn't too fond of them either, and when I switched out to the regular strings that I play, which are Ernie Ball Slinkies. The bass played and sounded much better, really came to life with those strings. And even if you are a Diodero string user and you like XL strings by them, I've even heard people on the bass forums talk about, you know, even the stock strings don't really sound like real Diodero XLs, and when they swapped out with a fresh set of Diodero XLs, that the bass sounded and played a whole lot better. So just keep that in mind, that the stock strings are not great. So if you happen to play one in the store, just know that the bass will really come alive when you get it home and put on a fresh set of strings that you prefer, and it'll make a big difference on the bass. Okay, now changing the strings is a little bit of a trick, and the reason for that is because in the manual that they send with the bass, there's no reference to changing the strings on this thing. This manual, I think, is the same manual that they use with all their instruments. It's just a generic manual, so it's worthless for the bass. But basically, if you go online and you do a search for changing strings on a Ibanez EHB bass, you'll find what you need. You'll find a video. I think it's from Ibanez as well, and the video walks you through the process of doing it. It's pretty easy to do. It's really no harder than, or might even be considered easier than changing the strings on a regular bass. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is cutting these strings. It's really a challenge because you're so close to this. I'm gonna call this the headstock of the bass, for lack of a better word, even though I know it's not really a full headstock, but where you clamp these strings down, it's hard to get your wire cutters, especially on the B string and the E string. It's hard to get close enough to it to really get a good cut. I had trouble. I actually couldn't get the B string cut until I loosened these back up, took the string out, cut it, and then reinserted it in and clamped it back down. That's the only way I could get the B string cut. And what I also did is I put tape down here, painter's tape. I put that down along this edge here, so it was underneath where the strings are, so that when I'm putting the strings through and also cutting them, it would keep the strings and the wire cutters from marring up the surface here. I still managed to get a little imprint here on where the B string is, because even though I had the tape down, I didn't realize how much I was really kind of pushing down trying to cut that string, and so I left a little impression in here with the wire cutter. So just be aware that you got to be careful in this area, because you can mar it up when you're putting on the strings. So I've only changed the strings one time, so maybe I can get a little bit better with it over time. But yeah, definitely getting the B and the E strings a little hard to cut, at least with my wire cutters, because maybe they're a little bit dull. Maybe I need a new pair, but it was a little hard getting it cut down in there. But otherwise, changing the strings was pretty easy. And yes, it holds its tune very well. Once you get it tuned up, yeah, it holds its tune, and really I only have to tweak it very minute amounts, maybe once a week or so, it seems like. I mean, I pretty much take the bass with me. I go to rehearsal or go play at church, and it's like, oh yeah, it's in tune. I don't even have to worry about it. And I think a lot of that is because you don't have the tuning pegs on the end here. So if you throw your bass into a gig bag and go, it's kind of getting bumped and stuff, and all those tuning pegs are moving around. We're here, they're protected, they don't move at all, so it stays very much in tune. Now the tuners are a bit stiff, so when you're tuning it, you're definitely going to feel, it's kind of hard to get it perfectly dialed in because it's so stiff. But once you do, then you don't have to worry about it. It'll stay pretty much in tune, other than, like I said, very minute little tweaks here and there. But the only thing is you have to retrain your muscle memory, because you'll go to tune and you'll be like, oh yeah. So that's a little weird. It's a little slower that way too, because you're plucking here and then twisting, pluck, twist, pluck, twist. Now I guess you could go this way and tune that way, but that's a little awkward. But anyway, it's, like I said, it holds its tune well. It takes a little longer to tune, but so what? It holds its tune better than any other bass that I've had, so I'm happy with it. Okay, I also wanted to show you about using the bass with a guitar stand. As you noticed here, I use Hercules stands. I like these because of the locking mechanism. And you probably think with a headless bass that it wouldn't work, with one of these stands, but it actually does. But there is a catch that you need to know about, and it's these little spacers that typically come with these stands. You want to make sure it has the spacers on, because if you don't have the spacers on, then it's going to slide right through. But with the spacers on, it works perfectly fine. You just kind of give it a little bit of an angle and then put it in like that, and then make sure it's secured, and then they're good. So yeah, you can use it. You can use this headless bass with these Hercules stands because of those spacers, and I like these stands because it really holds the bass a lot more snugly than you know, the traditional old school guitar stands that knock over easy. So there you go. Okay, so I want to show you the case that this bass came with. It's actually a guitar case, because like I mentioned earlier in the video, this bass is small enough to fit into a guitar case, and this is proof right here. So it comes with a guitar case, and it's actually a pretty decent case. It's got some really comfortable shoulder straps. Like, that's really super comfortable. It fits nice and tight against you. It doesn't flop around. I don't ever take the bass far enough distance to use both straps, but if I had to, yeah, I feel quite confident with these straps and how the bass fits. You could actually go dancing with this thing, and it's going to stay in place. So getting it off is another story. Okay, so the case is pretty good, and it's got a good amount of storage for your accessories. It's actually got 3 separate pouches here. You got the biggest pouch here, then you got the second biggest pouch, and then you got the third biggest pouch. So this, you can fit most of your cables and your straps and stuff like that. I can even fit an extra pedal in there if I need to. I can fit my iPad right in here, because I use my iPad at church for chord charts. You can fit your in-ears and your other stuff in here. So it actually gives you a good amount of storage. Let me open it up for you and pull out the bass. And since it's not super sturdy, but it's sturdy enough, as you can see, that I can actually load the bass without putting the bag down on the ground. So let me put this down. All right, so the case, it's not a super amount of padding. It could have more padding, but it's good enough for just kind of grab and go. You know, I just use the soft case for just going to and from my car, so I don't really need anything heavy duty, but yeah, it would be nice to have something heavier duty. So actually I do have something heavier duty that I'm using now, and this is the gig blade from Groove Gear, which has more padding, and it's also a little sturdier, and it should have, you would think it would have more storage, and technically it kind of does, because it has this ginormous pouch, but it's super tight. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room in there, especially once you put the bass in. I mean, just sliding my iPad down in there is, it's actually hard to do. And it's also got a little pouch here and a pouch here, again with my in-ears in there, but they're pretty small pouches, and it just has this little thin material. You can see the pouch here, sorta. So it has a thin material, so you don't want to put anything in there that's going to bump up against your instrument and scratch it. But overall, this has been a great little a great little case that's been good for just short travels, going to and from church with it, and rehearsals, and works really good. But this one, actually, it's a little bit easier fitting more stuff in these pouches, but I like having more padding that this has. All right, so my final assessment on this bass is that it is fantastic. I love this bass. It's a real game changer, and it's totally, for the most part, ruined me on my other basses. Since I've gotten this bass a month ago, I haven't played any of my other basses, and I just don't have the desire to play my other basses. And I've used this bass probably in at least eight church services at 2 different churches, and it's performed spectacularly. And yeah, the ergonomics of it are, I mean, it sounds great to me. It sounds great. I love the sound of it, but also the main selling point really is just the ergonomics of it, the lightweight, the compact size, the neck is just phenomenal on it. I love the neck. It's everything that I want in a neck. Yeah, so it's just, you can't put it down. And since it's so ergonomically friendly, it allows you to play a lot longer than you normally would on another bass. Like I can play this bass a whole lot longer than I can play any of my other basses. And so yeah, I highly, highly recommend it. And even though in my mind's eye, I will always kind of be more of a jazz bass player. I always imagine myself in my mind's eye, if I think of myself as a bass player, I think of myself with a jazz bass or some sort of custom jazz bass. But yeah, I think in reality, I think this is probably going to be the main bass that I'll be playing from this day forward. Yeah, it's a great bass. I highly recommend it. If you're thinking about getting one, buy it, because yeah, you'll love it. It's a great bass.